The story of a delivery man and a young lady accidentally fell in love. The rain drummed against the windshield of Marcus Chen's delivery van as he navigated through the narrow streets of downtown Seattle. At 28, he had been delivering packages for 3 years, and the rhythm of his days had become as predictable as the Pacific Northwest weather. Drop-off signature next address, a continuous loop that paid the bills while he worked on his true passion, photography. Marcus pulled up to a Victorian-style apartment building on Cherry Street, its faded blue paint and ornate trim speaking of better days. He grabbed the small package from his van, noting the recipient's name, Elena Rodriguez, apartment 3B. As he climbed the creaking stairs, he couldn't help but notice the building's character: the worn wooden banisters, the vintage tiles in the hallway, the way afternoon light filtered through a stained glass window. His photographer's eye was always working even during deliveries. He knocked on 3B expecting the usual hurried signature and quick goodbye. Instead, the door opened to reveal a young woman whose appearance made him momentarily forget his professional script. She had dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, paint-stained fingers, and eyes the color of autumn leaves. But it was her expression that caught him, a mixture of frustration and barely contained panic. Package for Elena Rodriguez. Marcus managed, holding out his scanner. Oh, thank God! She practically lunged for the box. You have no idea how badly I need this. I've been waiting all day. She paused, looking at him properly for the first time. I'm sorry I'm being rude. It's just, this contains a special pigment I ordered from Japan, and I have a gallery deadline tomorrow. You're an artist? Marcus asked, genuinely interested. Elena nodded, already tearing into the package. Watercolor mostly, though right now I feel more like a stress ball with a paintbrush. She pulled out a small jar of iridescent blue powder and held it up to the light like a treasure. This is going to save my exhibition. Marcus found himself smiling. Well, I'm glad I could be part of the rescue mission. Good luck with your deadline. As he turned to leave, Elena called out, Wait, I'm sorry for being so frantic. Would you like to see what this is for? I mean, since you delivered the final piece. Marcus checked his watch. He was ahead of schedule, and something about her enthusiasm was infectious. Sure, why not? Elena's apartment was a controlled chaos of creativity. Canvases leaned against walls, brushes sprouted from jars like strange flowers, and sheets of paper covered every flat surface. The air smelled of paint and jasmine tea. She led him to a large table where a series of paintings depicted the Seattle skyline at different times of day, each one seeming to capture not just the light but the mood of the city. These are incredible, Marcus said, meaning it. The way you've caught the morning fog over Elliott Bay. Elena looked at him with surprise. You know the city well. I photograph it sometimes, he admitted. Though nothing like this. This is art. I just document. Documentation can be art too, she said, mixing the Japanese pigment with practiced movements. What do you photograph? As Marcus described his work, candid street photography, capturing moments of human connection in urban spaces, Elena began applying the special pigment to her final painting, a twilight scene where the city lights began to twinkle against a deepening sky. The iridescent blue created an almost magical effect, making the transition between day and night shimmer with possibility. They talked easily, surprising themselves with the natural flow of conversation. Marcus learned that Elena had moved to Seattle from San Diego 2 years ago, chasing both cheaper rent and a more vibrant art scene. Elena discovered that Marcus had a degree in graphic design, but had chosen delivery work for the flexible schedule it gave him to pursue photography. I should probably get back to my route, Marcus finally said, though he found himself reluctant to leave. Of course, I'm sorry for keeping you. Elena walked him to the door. Thank you again for bringing my pigment, and for being interested. Most delivery people just want a signature. Most customers don't create magic with Japanese pigments. Marcus replied, making her laugh. As he walked down the stairs, he heard her call out, "My exhibition opens tomorrow night at the Belltown Gallery if you're interested." Ismay. Marcus waved acknowledgement and returned to his van, but his mind stayed in that paint-scented apartment. He finished his route on autopilot, thinking about the way Elena's eyes lit up when she talked about her art, how her hands moved with such certainty when she painted. The next evening found him standing outside the Belltown Gallery, camera bag slung over his shoulder, debating whether to go in. He'd dressed carefully, jeans and a button-down shirt that walked the line between casual and gallery appropriate. Through the window, he could see Elena in a flowing dress, gesturing animatedly as she spoke to a small group of visitors. He almost turned away, convinced she'd been merely polite in inviting him, but then she glanced toward the window and their eyes met. Her face broke into a genuine smile and she excused herself from the group meeting him at the door. "You came—" She seemed genuinely delighted. "I was hoping you would. I couldn't miss seeing the famous pigment in action," he said, trying to keep his tone light. Elena gave him a tour of her exhibition titled Seattle Atmospheres. Each painting captured a different quality of light and weather in the city, from the golden hour glow on the Space Needle to the moody grays of a November afternoon. The piece with the Japanese pigment, Twilight Transition, held the place of honor. "Would you mind if I photographed you with your work?" Marcus asked, lifting his camera. The artist in her element? Elena agreed and Marcus began shooting, capturing not just pose shots but candid moments. Elena explaining her technique to an elderly couple, her reflection caught in the glass, protecting one of her paintings. Her hands gesturing as she spoke about her inspiration. Through his lens, he saw her in a new way, noticing the graceful way she moved, the expressiveness of her face, the way she unconsciously tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking. As the evening wound down, Elena found him studying her paintings again. "You have a good eye," she said. "I saw you photographing. You don't just take pictures. You see moments. You don't just paint," he replied. "You capture feelings." They stood there surrounded by her atmospheric Seattle scenes, and Marcus felt something shift between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who saw the world through creative eyes. "I usually celebrate the end of an exhibition opening with terrible late-night pizza," Elena said. Interested, they ended up at a 24-hour pizza place in Capitol Hill, sharing stories over slices of questionable pepperoni. Elena told him about her childhood in San Diego, raised by her grandmother who taught her to see colors in emotions. Marcus shared his journey from graphic design to delivery, driving the freedom it gave him to pursue his photography without the soul-crushing demands of corporate work. "So you chose happiness over money," Elena said, understanding in her eyes. "Something like that? Though happiness doesn't pay rent very well. Tell me about it." "I teach kids art classes 3 days a week to keep the lights on." They talked until the restaurant started stacking chairs around them, and even then they were reluctant to end the evening. Marcus walked Elena back to her apartment, the Seattle streets quiet, except for the occasional passing car. "This was nice," Elena said at her building's entrance. "Really nice. Would you—" Marcus started, then stopped. "I mean, if you ever want a photography buddy to explore the city with—" "I'd love that," she said quickly. "I'm always looking for new perspectives." They exchanged numbers, and Marcus walked back to his van with a lightness in his step he hadn't felt in years. Over the following weeks, they began exploring Seattle together. Weekend mornings would find them at Pike Place Market, Elena sketching the vendors, while Marcus captured the early morning hustle. They discovered hidden alleys in the International District, climbed the water tower in Volunteer Park for sunset views, took the ferry to Bainbridge Island on a foggy Saturday that turned everything into an impressionist painting. Their creative collaboration felt natural. Elena would point out interesting light effects that Marcus might have missed, while he showed her how to see the geometric patterns in urban architecture. They began to influence each other's work. Marcus's photographs took on a more painterly quality, paying attention to color and mood, while Elena's paintings gained a photographer's eye for decisive moments. But it was the conversations between shots and sketches that really drew them together. They talked about everything: their fears about making it as artists, their families, their dreams of traveling to capture other cities. Marcus learned that Elena sang in the shower, always off-key, and had a weakness for strawberry ice cream. Elena discovered that Marcus had a secret love for terrible sci-fi movies and could make her laugh until her stomach hurt with his impressions of their overly serious dialogue. The shift from friendship to something more was gradual, like a watercolor wash building up in layers. There was the afternoon at the Olympic Sculpture Park when Elena grabbed his hand to pull him toward an installation, then forgot to let go. The rainy Tuesday when Marcus brought her soup because she mentioned feeling under the weather. The way they began texting throughout the day, small observations, jokes, photos of interesting things they encountered. Marcus found himself taking different routes during his deliveries, ones that would bring him past the Belltown Gallery or Elena's apartment building. He started carrying his good camera in the van just in case he spotted something she'd like. Elena began incorporating elements from Marcus's photographs into her paintings, creating a visual dialogue between their work. The moment things truly changed came on a November evening. They'd spent the day photographing and sketching in Discovery Park, losing track of time among the trails and viewpoints. As the sun set, they found themselves on a bluff overlooking Puget Sound, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold that seemed almost too perfect to be real. "We should head back," Elena said, but made no move to pack up her supplies. Marcus lowered his camera, watching her as she tried to capture the sunset's reflection on the water. The dying light caught her profile, and he felt his heart constrict with a realization that had been building for weeks. "Elena," he said softly. She looked up from her sketch, and something in his expression made her set down her brush. The moment stretched between them, fragile and full of possibility. "I need to tell you something," Marcus began, but Elena was already moving toward him. "I know," she whispered. "Me too." Their first kiss tasted of possibility and paint water with the Seattle sunset as witness. It was gentle and certain, a confirmation of what they'd both been feeling, but hadn't quite known how to express. When they finally pulled apart, Elena laughed softly. "So much for accidentally." "What do you mean?" "When I tell people this story someday, I'll say we accidentally fell in love. But I don't think there was anything accidental about it. I think I started falling the moment you actually wanted to see my paintings. I think I started falling when you attacked that package like it contained the secrets of the universe." Marcus admitted, making her laugh again. They packed up their supplies in the gathering darkness, hands finding each other naturally as they walked back to the parking lot. Everything had changed, yet nothing had. They were still the same two artists who saw the world in frames and washes of color. Only now they saw each other in it too. The following months unfolded like a collaborative art project. Marcus's apartment, once a sparse bachelor pad, began to show signs of Elena's presence, a forgotten paintbrush by the sink canvases propped against his bookshelf, the scent of jasmine tea in his kitchen. Elena's space absorbed Marcus's influence too. Contact sheets pinned to her inspiration board, a vintage camera on her windowsill, his worn flannel shirt hanging on her chair. They worked side by side, often comfortable in shared silence, broken by occasional observations or requests for opinion. Marcus would edit photos while Elena painted, their creative processes intertwining. Sometimes Elena would pose for Marcus's portraits, learning to be comfortable in front of the camera. Other times, Marcus would try his hand at painting under Elena's patient instruction, producing works that made them both laugh, but that Elena insisted on keeping. Their relationship weathered the small storms that test any couple. There was the week when Marcus's van broke down, and the repair costs meant he couldn't afford his share of a planned weekend trip. Elena's offer to cover him led to their first real argument about money and pride. They worked through it over coffee, an honest conversation establishing boundaries and understanding. There was Elena's anxiety when a gallery show received mixed reviews, the critic calling her work pleasant but lacking edge. Marcus found her surrounded by her paintings, questioning everything. He didn't try to dismiss her feelings or offer empty reassurances. Instead, he sat with her, helped her see the strength in her unique vision, reminded her why she created art in the first place. They supported each other through family challenges, too. When Marcus's mother fell ill, Elena drove with him to Portland, spending hours in hospital waiting rooms, her quiet presence a comfort. When Elena's grandmother passed away, Marcus held her as she grieved the woman who had shaped her artistic eye, then helped her create a memorial exhibition of paintings inspired by her grandmother's garden. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms and new possibilities. Marcus's photography began gaining recognition first through social media, then a small gallery showing, then interest from a larger venue. Elena's work evolved too, incorporating mixed media and growing bolder in scope. They pushed each other, celebrated each other, became each other's first reader and honest critic. The idea came to them simultaneously one evening as they sat on Elena's fire escape sharing Chinese takeout and watching the city lights twinkle to life. "What if we did a joint exhibition?" Elena said. "Just as Marcus suggested, we should show our work together." They laughed at the synchronicity, then began planning excitedly. The concept evolved over weeks of discussion, a show exploring the same locations through two different mediums, showing how a photographer and a painter could capture the same moment in entirely different yet complementary ways. They spent the summer creating new work specifically for the exhibition. Early mornings found them at the same locations Marcus shooting, while Elena sketched, then returning to their studios to develop their individual interpretations. The process deepened both their art and their relationship, teaching them new ways of seeing through each other's eyes. The exhibition, titled Parallel Visions, opened in September at a respected Capitol Hill gallery. The opening night was a blur of friends, family collectors, and critics. Elena wore the vintage dress they'd found at a thrift store, its deep blue reminding Marcus of the Japanese pigment that had started everything. Marcus had finally invested in a proper suit, though he still wore his beaten leather camera strap like a talisman. The show was a success beyond their hopes. Critics praised the innovative collaboration, the way the photographs and paintings spoke to each other across the gallery walls. Several pieces sold opening night, and there was interest from other galleries in taking the show to Portland and San Francisco. But the moment that mattered most came near the end of the evening. Marcus found Elena standing before their paired works of Discovery Park, the bluff where they'd shared their first kiss. His photograph captured the exact moment of sunset, all golden light and shadow. Her painting took that same moment and transformed it into something dreamlike, emotional, true, in a way that transcended literal representation. "We did it," she said softly, leaning into him. "We did," he agreed, kissing the top of her head. Later, as they cleaned up the gallery, stacking empty wine glasses and collecting comment cards, Elena stopped suddenly. "Marcus," she said, her voice strange, "look at this." She handed him a business card. It was from a prestigious New York gallery with a handwritten note on the back. "Would love to discuss representation. Please call." They stared at each other, the implications sinking in. New York meant opportunity, meant taking their art to the next level. It also meant leaving Seattle, leaving the city that had brought them together. "We don't have to decide anything tonight," Marcus said carefully. "No," Elena agreed. "But we should talk about it. About what we want, together." They locked up the gallery and walked through the Seattle streets hand in hand, not speaking, but both thinking about the future. The city around them sparkled with the same magic it had held since that first day when a delivery man knocked on an artist's door with a package that would change both their lives. As they reached Elena's apartment building, their building now since Marcus had moved in 3 months ago, Elena stopped on the steps. "You know what I realized tonight," she said, "looking at our work side by side. What's that? That the best art I've ever made has been since I met you. Not because you complete me or any of that nonsense, but because you make me brave enough to be fully myself." Marcus set down the box of leftover gallery supplies he was carrying and took her hands. "You make me see the world as more than just moments to capture. You make me see the feeling inside them." They kissed there on the steps, the Seattle drizzle starting to fall, and Marcus thought about how a simple delivery had led to this, a life intertwined with someone who understood not just his art, but his heart. "So," Elena said against his lips, "New York? We'll figure it out," he promised. "Together." "Together," she agreed. As they climbed the stairs to their apartment, Marcus reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. If his regular route driver hadn't called in sick that day, if Elena hadn't desperately needed that specific pigment, if he'd been running late and rushed through the delivery, if she hadn't invited him in, but she had, and he'd stayed, and somewhere between that first conversation about art and this moment, they'd built something beautiful. Not just love, though that was part of it. They'd built a creative partnership, a mutual support system, a shared vision of what life could be when you found someone who saw the world through complementary eyes. In their apartment, Elena began making tea while Marcus uploaded the photos he'd taken of the opening. They moved around each other with practiced ease, the domestic choreography of a couple who'd learned each other's rhythms. Outside, Seattle hummed with its usual energy, the city that had been their canvas and their catalyst. "I love you," Elena said suddenly, apropos of nothing as she handed him his cup of tea. "I love you too," Marcus replied, meaning it with every fiber of his being. They sat together on their second-hand couch, looking at the wall where their work hung side by side, photographs and paintings in conversation just like their creators. Whatever came next, New York or Seattle's success or struggle, they'd face it as they'd learned to create together, each bringing their own vision to the shared masterpiece of their life. The rain continued to fall on Seattle, that familiar rhythm that had soundtracked their entire relationship. And in a small apartment filled with art and love and possibility, a delivery man turned photographer and a young lady turned renowned painter planned their next adventure knowing that the best accidents were the ones that led you exactly where you needed to be. As the night deepened, they talked about practical things, lease agreements and moving costs, portfolio preparation and gallery politics. But underneath the logistics ran a current of excitement, the thrill of artists who'd found not just success, but partnership. They'd accidentally fallen in love over a package of pigment, but they'd deliberately built something lasting from that serendipitous beginning. And in the end, that's what their story was really about, not just the accident of meeting, but the choice to keep showing up, to keep creating, to keep choosing each other through every delivery, every brushstroke, every photograph, every moment that followed that first knock on the door. The city slept around them, but Elena and Marcus stayed awake planning and dreaming, their intertwined fingers a promise that whatever canvases lay ahead, they'd fill them together.